World of Warcraft needs to be cool again. Hello everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and I started playing World of Warcraft again back in November. And I will admit, I really like the War Within. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and we're going to talk about one element to World of Warcraft that I still think needs a lot of revision, work, and improvement. It simply needs to be cool again. There are few things, especially in gaming, that I had been as down and out about as I was about World of Warcraft throughout that BFA to Dragonflight era, especially when it comes to storytelling. But when it comes to the War Within, I thought the storytelling overall was a drastic improvement. Decent characters, good development, interesting things that happened, and a story that flowed from one zone to the other to tell a cohesive beginning, middle, and end. I quite enjoy the War Within story, but it does lean more into the emotional side of things than having a bunch of really cool moments that Warcraft overall used to be really known for. And I think when Warcraft's story is at its best is when it's able to blend the two together. And I think if the Warcraft story is ever going to be fully back on track and to be fully cool and interesting and engaging again, they need to remember what it means to be cool. What do I mean by this? It's all well and good to have an emotional storyline with interesting characters and motivations that develop over time. But the elements of the Warcraft story that I always gravitated to the most, at least personally, are the ones that were adrenaline filled. They understood rule of cool, and they were just badass instead of just trying to be emotional or existential with its overall threats to be cool that way. It had cool characters doing cool things that were fun to root for or to root against, with great memorable dialogue that really captured the feel and the hype of the moment. Characters like Garrosh Hellscream, Varian Wrynn, Tyrion Forging, Arthas before the jailer stuff, Illidan Stormrage. Want to go back to Warcraft 3 and we can do that with characters like Thrall and Grom, even Malfurion and Tyrande back then. But I think especially in the recent expansions, there just haven't been that many moments in the story that made me go, oh, that's awesome, oh, that's really cool, I'm going to really remember this for a long time, just because of how hype and cool and memorable this singular moment was. The last one I can think of is Garrosh back in Shadowlands, and even then the animation there was absolutely god-awful. It was the writing and Garrosh's VO carrying that scene, filled with adrenaline, and just being dang cool.
But every choice I made, I would proudly make again. You will submit. I submit to no one. Not you, not the jailer, and not that coward Thrall. For the Horde!
Warcraft is an IP filled with various different aesthetics, and I do think in some way it should feel like an action movie. At least in terms of having those blood-pumping moments and characters that just make you get out of your chair and go, oh hell yeah dude, they're here, they're talking, I can't wait to see what happens here. And there's just nothing that gravitating in terms of character right now. I think the closest we have is Xal'atath and Ilaria, and like, that's borderline in my opinion. And while I think the story of the War Within, for the most part, is well constructed and well told with decent characters, I think Warcraft has managed to find an interesting way to incorporate emotional storytelling into the game, and it hasn't ever really been able to fully grab onto that idea and run with it for an extended period of time before. It's had it in moments, but not really consistently for a long time, and I think this working formula they have in the War Within is something they should hold on to and cherish going into the future. Not just in terms of the main story, but also in various side quests you can go down. Really cool and emotional stuff there. But the entire story shouldn't boil down to a glorified therapy session for a couple of characters, and that is the feeling that overly emotional storytelling can elicit over time, especially when you come off the back of something like Dragonflight, which felt very childish in its overall presentation, especially its conclusion and finale. The War Within does a lot right, and I don't want that to be lost in the sauce of this entire conversation, which has been raging in the Warcraft community for a long time at this point. World of Warcraft is in the middle of systemic change. they brought Chris Metzen back, and from previous interviews, we're not going to really feel his presence and this new change in tone of the story until the later bits of The War Within, if I'm remembering that interview correctly. And who knows what Midnight and The Last Titan will bring to the table. It is extremely likely that they're going to bring back the character of Illidan Stormrage, who is one of the best examples of a character that is really cool, and is one of the faces of Rule of Cool for World of Warcraft and Warcraft overall with Warcraft 3. That is a great character, and the last time we saw him in Legion, he brought some of the most memorable scenes to that expansion. When he returned at the top of the Nighthold to blow up Gul'dan in a similar way to how Gul'dan killed Varian Wrynn. A great parallel, but a great way to reintroduce that character. And then you had that scene, I am my scars. That character, that guy right there, you are not prepared. In certain ways, he's one of the best examples for Rule of Cool and how to do it well for Warcraft that this IP has ever had. And I think when we see that character be brought back into the storyline, that will really be the test. That will really be the test if they are actually really competent when it comes to storytelling and story writing and all of that. Because it's Warcraft, this isn't meant to be some kind of melodrama or some late night soap opera and all of that. I don't think you should run away from emotional-based storytelling either, but you have to understand your identity. You have to understand the DNA, the bread and butter, the meat and potatoes of what makes this world and makes these stories so compelling for this IP, or at least what did for the longest time, and that's being awesome and cool, with great big bombastic adrenaline-filled moments. Remember the Wrathgate? Remember pretty much the entire character of Garrosh Hellscream? Varian on the Broken Shore, the fight against Arthas, the Lich King, back in Wrath. Those things are memorable because they're so cool. And while the Warcraft story, at least in World of Warcraft, has never been that well told, I think they're getting way better at storytelling recently with The War Within. Now it's just a matter of, okay, you have the mechanism to tell a good story, to have good pacing, to have a coherent narrative arc that goes from one zone to the other with an interesting beginning, middle, and end. I know you can do it because you did it here with The War Within. What you now really have to capture is the magic from the past, the magic of what made World of Warcraft and Warcraft overall so memorable and iconic for so long. Badass character designs, badass monster designs. Again, I think they're getting better there as well with The War Within, with stuff like the Kopis or the Nerubians and all that kind of stuff. And the future's looking bright. Midnight being between the forces of the light versus the forces of the void, dealing with Quel'Thalas. Good, well-known, memorable, and awesome locations in Warcraft's story. And then with The Last Titan, we're going back to Northrend, one of the most beloved locations in all of Azeroth. They have the blueprint, they have everything they need to do this well. It's just a matter of execution. And I don't want this to come off as if the modern World of Warcraft story is inherently bad. There's a lot of problems that need to be addressed from the times of Battle for Azeroth and Shadowlands and Dragonflight, and the state those expansions and those stories left the overall world. But right now in Khazal-Gar and The War Within, they have all they need to tell a really interesting story going into the future. I don't think we'll get what I'm really talking about here with 11.1, with it being a goblin patch. That satisfies a different element to Warcraft's story with the fun and the goofy. But going into the future, I do think if they want people to really fall back in love with the story they're trying to tell and the stories they want to tell in the future, you need to nail this. This is one of the most important, massive elements to World of Warcraft they still haven't really managed to recapture. It's not going to ever feel like Game of Thrones. It's not ever going to feel like some overly dark and gritty, mature dark fantasy hellscape or anything like that, and it never should either. But it needs to feel like Warcraft. That is important. It's in the name. And I think the modern WoW story for the longest time has suffered from this overall writing issue that I have with a lot of storytelling nowadays, where it boils down to feeling too melodramatic, where it feels too rooted specifically in emotions rather than cool and interesting interesting plot points that happen with an interesting narrative that weave throughout the entire experience. It's too focused on saying this emotion's good or this emotion's bad. It's a glorified therapy session, or at least is perceived as one, rather than being a good story where you experience those emotions naturally. It feels too often like it focuses on what the message is instead of how to convey that message in a great and engaging way. I think Anduin as a character for the longest time is a great example of what not to do for Warcraft story, but I think he was a bit better handled here in The War Within. In a lot of ways, he is the best microcosm. He is the best. If they can make this character work, then the story's better. Because he's the best representation of all the issues the Warcraft story has had for the longest time. And if they can make him better, in a lot of ways, the story will ride or die based on that character, because he's obviously, especially if you've been keeping up with the Warcraft story, that dude is the future. 1000%. Like, borderline, that dude is the face of the IP. Not alone, but he's one of them at least. But he's the best example of the story being overly emotional, whiny, preachy, while abandoning the cool, the badass, the adrenaline, the hype that the story used to have. Especially with his father, Varian. And while I don't think he's perfect right now, and it's still an extremely emotional story with The War Within, especially with the character of Anduin, it's better. And I think the big difference between Dragonflight and The War Within is the fact The War Within is told way better, especially with Anduin. There's a lot of elements in The War Within story that feel to me as if Blizzard's trying to talk about their own overarching story and experience with World of Warcraft. In a lot of ways, it does kind of feel like that. How Anduin could be a representation of the World of Warcraft story and all of us trying to overcome the pain of the past, Shadowlands, and find the magic of what we used to be able to have and used to be able to do, and to recapture that going into the future. And it's not all the way there yet, but there's a spark. And I think in that example, and in that context, and in that light, I have hope. And maybe I'm just an optimist, because we still have to see them actually prove it. It's all well and good to be able to identify the problem. You have to be able to address it, and then improve the situation so that it's no longer a problem. And they have to still do that. And we're not there yet. And I don't think we will be there for a little bit at this point with the way that the War Within story is shaping up. I think Midnight will be a real good indicator of, are they going in the right direction? Or are we still meandering in this regard? I want badass characters. I want characters that make me go, oh, hell yeah, what's gonna happen here? Oh, that was awesome. I want cool one-liners. I want the cheese. I want the action movie stuff. Not everything needs to be overly serious or emotional to try and be, like, mature and cool and stuff like that. Sometimes just being cool is enough. There's a reason the term rule of cool exists. And for certain IPs and for certain stories, it's more important than not. And I think Warcraft overall is one of those IP where rule of cool is so drastically important. I think The War Within, as I've talked about before, is them showing they can do better. It's not perfect yet, but it's much better. And not just a little, I do mean much better. You have the formula. You have shown me and proven to me you are capable and competent enough to tell a compelling story and to have good storytelling in the game. Not just relegated to novels outside of it. You can tell a good beginning, middle, and end with interesting character arcs within the confines of the game and the story that's told there. The skeleton is good. Now we need the muscle. We need the flesh. We need the skin. We need the hair. We need the eyes. We need everything else on top of that to make it really living and breathing and alive again. And not just a skeleton languishing away in the corner of a crypt. And maybe a stopped clock is right twice a day, but I just go back to that Garrosh scene in Shadowlands, and it was short and it was crappily animated, but good God, was that exactly what I want. Bringing the Warcraft back to World of Warcraft doesn't just mean have a bunch of battles. It doesn't just mean have a war. I want warriors. I want badasses. I want adrenaline. I want hype. I want to feel my blood pumping in this story. I want to be invested. I want to be immersed. I want it to be cool. And I think it can do that again. And I think they're trying to work their way to it. But it's still all a matter of if they can hit the landing or if they even have actually begun to take off. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe. Have a great day. Leave a comment down below with if you agree with me or if you don't. I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. And let me know, what was the last great story moment in World of Warcraft that made you really go, oh hell yeah? Or just what was your favorite moment overall that you still remember after all this time? I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. And let me know why, if you can. Stay safe. Have a great day. Please make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you liked the video and you want to support the channel. I know I'd appreciate it. Stay safe. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Go play some video games. Keep dreaming big. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.